Hello and welcome to week 2 of the English as a Medium of Instruction for Academics MOOC. This is our video update. I am Rob again.
And I'm still Mary.
And she's still Mary.
Yeah.
And I'd like to thank you very much for your ongoing contributions. The discussions have again been informative, sharing, interesting and full of great ideas. And I'm going to hand over to Mary to discuss some of those some of her thoughts for this week.
Some of my thoughts for this week. Well, I first looked at the first step, 2.1, where you were talking about what you needed for the week. And roughly it was techniques, tools, strategies, practical ideas, tips, insights, so on and so forth, was the main thrust of what you were asking for. And I think and I hope that you are getting what you're asking for, because remember that Rob and I are just facilitators. We're trying to make this happen for you, and we're asking questions, and we've structured the course in such a way in that we invite responses from everyone. So these tips and ideas and strategies don't come from us, they come from you in your contributions, and this is wonderful to see, isn't it, Rob? You know, to see that those questions and those needs that you establish right at the beginning are being answered, not just by us, but by the group as a whole, which, you know, makes for such a rich and stimulating experience. So thank you for that. One thing I would like to single out, someone asked for methodology with regard to EMI, and we'd just like to clarify that point in that we don't think that there is a single one methodology of EMI, because it's so rich and so varied throughout the world that people are discovering, establishing how best to use English as a medium of instruction for themselves, so that their courses are successful for their students. So we don't talk about an EMI methodology, but methodologies in the plural, that there are many, many ways to reach that particular goal.
Yeah, and I would add just to that, you know, answering the simple questions, is there one way that everybody learns? No. Are there one set of learning objectives for every single course in a university? No. How can there be one unified methodology for everything we do in higher education through English? The answer is that, you know, there can't be this one methodology. No. And this is why, as Mary said, this interaction between people around the world is so important, because, you know, listening to different voices is where you get your wisdom, and I think wisdom is sometimes much more important as an educator than training and guidance on what you should do wherever you are. Sorry, Mary.
I think that was
interrupted you. Is that
No, you didn't interrupt me. It's fine. Would you like to carry on with some of your points?
Oh, happily. So one thing, I was interested in the contributions this week on a number of levels. Thank you for everything. We've given a couple of tasks this week to evaluate videos, to look for examples of the kind of materials and styles people use in the classroom, and these have been really interesting discussions. And one observation from the outsider's perspective is highlighting that point. When you look at examples that you've provided of videos of good teaching, you've got lots of different levels of evaluation. So what you're looking for as positive qualities depend on who you are, what are your interests, what's the talk about, why is it engaging and interesting. Other people have looked at it for perhaps what you're looking to analyse in your own practice, like how do they manage topic change, how do they introduce the topic, how do they signal the stages. So a much more structured approach to evaluating the videos. And again, we're not just talking about methods, because all these things are important. What makes you a good educator? It could be a range of things which will be different from the next person. You know, use of humour might be great in some contexts. It might be a disaster
in others. Absolutely.
So those videos were wonderful examples, and I'd encourage you to look back at other people's examples and just see the different ways that they look at people's performances, for the content, for the delivery, for the style, and for, like I said, selection of content is part of the methodology. Choosing what people will be interested in is the first step to successful teaching. It's not about, even if you've got the most exciting, wonderful voice in the world, you can't make, teaching about paint drying very interesting to a large audience.
No.
Right, maybe Mary. Okay. So again, that I found that really fascinating, and it really underlines what we're talking about.
It does very
much. And that's why context is everything.
Context.
Students are everything.
Students and their needs, what they need, and then you attempting to deliver some kind of knowledge or wisdom, some kind of knowledge, some kind of content for them that will be appropriate to their needs. And we use the word, and Rob used it a couple of seconds ago, the idea of a performance in front of students, and there is something of the performance, I believe, when we're lecturing and teaching. There's the element of acting, but at the same time we have to be true to ourselves. And if we have this passion for our subject, and a few people have mentioned this, then it's wonderful that shines through, that your passion for your subject comes through in your delivery, because that can pull people in who might not, at first glance appear to be terribly interested, but your passion can be quite infectious and draw the students in. So, thinking about yourself as a person and who you are in front of your students. We do choose the face that we present to our students. So thinking about that, how am I coming across? Am I being truthful to myself? Am I letting my individuality come through? People have mentioned, telling little anecdotes and so on, which can suit a lot of teachers, whatever context they're in, but it might not suit everybody. Some people might feel quite protective of anecdotal situations, that they don't want to reveal to students. So it's just thinking about ourselves, thinking about our students, thinking about that relationship, and just with wisdom and experience, making the right choices.
And also, two other points there is I was just going to mention that, in relation to anecdotes, people tend to accept anecdotes from people they think are more established, more mature, more experienced. So what age you are, what stage in your lecturing career you are in, might affect how you interact with students as well. And the other thing is, we've talked a lot about performance, and some of the example videos are TED Talks, which are spoken performances more often than not. But the other key point to teaching very often in many contexts is thinking, when do I be quiet? When do I give the students the role of learning, of sharing, of engaging, rather than me delivering everything? Because if you focus so much on yourself, you forget sometimes that they can do it a lot of the time rather than you. Another point I wanted to mention was Anna's point, a very interesting idea of transference, and this relates to the kind of qualities of teaching rather than the micro analysis of what happens in the classroom. But she talks about this idea of transference, what she learnt, I think, in education psychology, of the passionate teacher planting a seed of passion.
Oh yes, I remember
her
that.
Students. Yeah, I like that.
Yes, a seed of passion.
Yeah, last week I liked journey. This time I like seeds of passion.
Seeds of
you
passion.
can see what kind of person I am. But it's the so this idea of you're not just conveying knowledge to students, you're motivating them, and also you're creating a class atmosphere all the time. They're not just learning the content, they're not just developing particular sort of steps towards learning objectives, they're becoming better learners, they're becoming more confident communicators, they're becoming more motivated in all the activities that are around the class and the university and the field. So again, we're taking steps in a developmental direction, their developmental journey, and I like that idea of this conveying your passion to students about your subject and trying to giving them space to bring it back to you as well and to other students is an important part of education. And finally, I was going to mention the native speaker discussion, and really to say thank you very much for reading these long things that I write. It's nice to know that some of you have made it to the end and appreciated what I've tried to express. And just to say, yeah, it's an important area, and it doesn't just exist with native speakers. I think there is some discrimination around English teaching and EMI, like a favouring of native speakers, but it's not just among people who are native speakers of English. It can also be among people who are labelled native-like, or have mastered some of the competencies and some of the deliveries of this idea of native speakers and can use that to enhance their career, to enhance the way they interact with students and are seen positively. And as we said last week, it's important to make a space for different identities, for people who have different styles, different ways of communicating. Because if EMI is international, we need these voices to be accepted and valued. If EMI is not really international, then we need to problematize that and say this is causing discrimination and difficulties. So that's a very interesting area, and thank you very much for reading that. And a final question we had was from Zia, and it's a very difficult question. So it's, how do we teach students who speak English as a third language, so not the language of the home, not the language of the society, but just the language as a foreign language in school, but these students are going to go on to study on EMI programs in future? And to be honest, the answer to that question is an incredibly challenging one. Of course, as teachers, you have to be aware of what's coming next. Perhaps you need to draw students' attention to the impact that that English is going to have on their lives, potentially, but also with this real critical awareness that you don't want to harm their education by overemphasizing English when they're developing their knowledge through their first languages. We don't want to, again, it's a real balancing act. And the question to that, there are lots of articles about situations where English is in a very problematic position, particularly in many developing countries, sometimes due to a legacy of colonialism. And it's a very difficult position, but I think, again, it's one that we can go on to discuss, but it's something that I guess you have to remain true to the best ways you can educate your students, the best ways you can prepare them for what's coming next without disadvantaging them in the other things they have to study, or disadvantaging them by not really preparing them as well as you could. So it's a tough one, but I would so I would just do the best I could with the pedagogies available, but with an eye to that goal that is coming up after they've finished, which can be it can be a gatekeeper that prevents some students from going on to higher education in some countries, which is not an ideal. It's not a positive situation in many ways, but I guess as an English teacher you have to do your best to...
Yes, if that's the reality.
That's
all you can do is your best in the situation.
The government have made a decision. You can't undo that decision, unmake that decision. So, So you were talking very much about, working with your students. I just want to just think once again about you as teachers who are in the situation of teaching through the medium of English. Now, I get the impression from the responses that we've read on the various steps
that some of you are quite new to EMI. So this is quite a big step for you to take, to be thinking about moving in this direction. You know, and once again, I link back to the question I asked last week. You know, what is your motivation? Is it because you feel obliged to, or because you really, really want to? So I think there's a lot more to be said about that. Whereas others amongst you are perhaps training other teachers to be teachers of EMI. So we've got people who are new and people who are now training other people. And I would love to be able to give everybody the confidence to do what they need to do. And this is my dilemma, and I've mentioned it before because it's constantly there at the back of my mind. How can we give you the confidence to do these things when we're miles away from you and the technology separates us? How do we transmit a feeling of confidence? We can say the words, go for it, do it, but then you really, really do have to act on that. So all we can say is that small steps are the way to go. That by observing other people who might be a little bit more advanced than you are on this journey, perhaps talk to them, try and establish some sort of communication with them, that you could perhaps observe a lesson or something. But what I really want to try and transmit is this feeling of confidence, particularly for those setting out and particularly for the trainers, because how do you transmit this feeling, empower people to teach through the medium of English? And I'd really like to encourage the trainers on this course to get back to us and say what their techniques are and how they manage to do it, as well as hearing from people who are on the first steps of the journey. But whoever you are, whether you're in the first steps of the journey or you're pretty well advanced and you're training others, you are leaders in your field, because this is, you know, such an important area in higher education in the world, that we need leaders like you to move in the right direction with this very wise and very wide approach, and a very comprehensive and holistic approach to teaching. We need you to move forward with this, so that the idea of there being some sort of a single way of teaching EMI, or, you know, there's one way of doing it and other ways are not as effective, so that we break down this idea, and we can empower you to find your own ways of teaching effectively, more than effectively, brilliantly, through the medium of English in your context and meet the needs of your students. So I'm trying to transmit this feeling of confidence, and I can say the words, but how can we do it better than just saying the words, be confident? That's all I wanted to say for this week, but we have got things to say about next week, haven't we?
We do indeed.
Sorry,
so
I'm
next
losing my
week
voice a bit.
we have.
Excuse me.
That's okay. We have drilling outside and coughing inside.
Oh
but
dear.
thank you for staying with us. Next week we have the live session.
Yes.
We would be very grateful if you could go to step 3.17. Yes, okay, I remembered correctly. 3.17, and if you have a question or an area of discussion you would like us to engage with, please go on that step and tell us what it is. You can also post on that step during the live session if you're willing. If you're willing and able to join us, we'd be very happy if you can. It's 3 o'clock British time, so 3 o'clock in the afternoon British time. We've tried to choose a time when people from all over the world might be able to join us, but we understand that the audience of this MOOC are very busy people, so don't worry if you can't come. The video will be made available. But please feed in anything you would like discussed, any questions you have, any ideas you would like to raise, and please do get involved in the conversation and engage with that.
You know, it would be wonderful if you know, you could be available at 3 o'clock British time next week. But if you can't, you know, our lovely camera person, Mimi, will be filming as usual, so you can experience the live session afterwards, even if you can't be there in person. We really look forward to it. This is the high spot of the course for us. So we always get terribly excited about it.
Yes.
Anything else to add, Rob?
I have nothing else to add
No.
except another thank you for all
Yeah.
your contributions.
Yeah.
Again, it's been really interesting, and we learn every time the
Yes,
MOOC runs. We
it's
learn
a
a
brilliant
lot
experience for us.
from your
Yeah.
So
And it's
again,
different every time, and this is wonderful.
Yeah.
And I feel that we've got some real leaders out there.
Oh, we've got some lovely people out
Yeah.
there. Yes.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
See you next week.
See you in week
Bye-bye.
3. Bye bye.